Yo everyone, just a quick formal announcement before getting into the video. I will be co-streaming throughout all of the Dallas LAN event major this weekend, May 31st through June 2nd on my channel. If interacting with myself and the community as well as reacting to the games in live time together sounds like something you'd enjoy, definitely stop by and support the channel. It would mean a lot. Hopefully I see some of you guys there, and now on to the video. After months of grinding and waiting for this moment, we finally arrived at the first ever Overwatch Champions Series official in-person LAN event being held at Dallas DreamHack. 8 teams across 3 regions will go into a gauntlet, with only one emerging with the top prize money, bragging rights, and enshrining themselves in the OWCS history books. A lot of patience, hard work, and determination has led to this moment, and only one question remains now. Who's gonna take this thing home? Usually tournaments like this and the feel they give off, the outcome seems obvious, but in recent memory, we've seen a lot of matches and specific tournaments go way off script, so one has to wonder if we're in for some more crazy surprises here. Today I'm gonna give you my opinion, as well as an all-inclusive guide and preview of what this OWCS Dallas LAN event is looking like. We've got 8 teams going up in this double elimination bracket. Space Station, Students of the Game, Team Falcons, ENCE, Crazy Raccoon, M80, Toronto Defiant, and Twisted Minds are about to enter the gauntlet, and it's going to be in front of a live crowd for the first time since the Overwatch League ended. As I'm sure all of you know at this point, Overwatch LAN events tend to go super hard, so I'm sure it's going to be a great time, and the crowd is going to pump a bunch of life into some of these games, which will hopefully be really good. And I say hopefully because you never know for sure what's going to happen. You don't know if one team's just going to dominate and cruise through all of the competition, or if we're going to see a lot of close matches and some upsets along the way. Regardless, it's going to be our first look at international competition here. A lot of these teams will be meeting face-to-face for the first time, and it could be a preview of what's to come this November in DreamHack Sweden for the first ever OWCS Championship match. When it comes to the general outlook of these 8 participants and how you're feeling about them confidence-wise and what it took for them to get here and the general valuation of their rosters, they're separated into a couple of different categories. They're in their own boats. The first tier, so to speak, is going to be at the bottom, and those are the guys that are either just happy to be there at all and or have something fundamentally wrong with their team that will likely contribute to their downfall, and I'd say the 2 teams that best fit this category are Students of the Game and Twisted Minds. I talked about these guys quite a bit in the previous video, so definitely check it out if you haven't already. We'll try and go quick here, but basically with Students, their roster just isn't good enough. They're arguably the worst one there. They are, in a sense, just happy to be there. They were fortunate to make it into that 3rd place slot in NA, thanks to Timeless as well as Luminosity choking and basically giving it to them on a silver platter. Now, the roster itself is extremely likable. Between Rack Attack's comeback arc and a lot of the amazing NA personalities they have, they can be really easy to cheer for. But without the firepower needed, it really may not matter in the end. Now, they ended up playing really clutch in NA, which is a good sign. But beyond that, I don't really know if they have what it takes. They've never punched above to that highest level yet. They've never given us an opportunity to do so, and just knowing what they have and the inexperience and all that, it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. With Twisted Minds, on the other hand, though, we know that their roster is more than good enough to compete. They won EMEA Stage 1, but unfortunately, they're more so in the boat where they just have some fundamental issues with their team that aren't possible to be solved at this moment in time. With KSA stepping away from the team, they're left with a major vacancy at that tank position, and unfortunately that means that Labda, who has no prior experience as a tank player, is jumping straight into this role. We saw how it worked in Stage 2, it didn't look the prettiest in the world, and it's hard to imagine with just a month of practice that things are going to look a lot better. Twisted Minds have massive potential. The talent is still there. Quartz and Yubi are playing at world-class levels. They are great, and they have other guys who are very proven too. And sometimes they've shown throughout their history that they can just play a composition really well. They'll stick to it, and they'll just execute better than everybody else with good teamwork and all their guys clutching up no matter what the situation is. These guys definitely live for the spotlight, and for that reason alone, you can't completely underestimate them. However, we have to ask ourselves, will it be enough with Lambda on tank? Will they be able to survive? As well as the support changes going through. Kellick's retired, you have other people rotating in there. It's just a very chaotic situation for them, and it feels like at this point they just need a break to regroup, and I don't know if the last few weeks is necessarily enough. Moving up to the next tier, I'd argue you'd probably fit in all of the non-Asia teams. Maybe you could say that M80's like in a tier of their own just below those guys, but I'll give them a few extra credit points because they did defeat Toronto Defiant once, which is no easy feat. But generally, I'd say M80, Toronto, ENCE, and Space Station all kind of go into the second tier, where it feels like they can punch above their weight class and they can be competitive, but just knowing what they're up against, we can't be totally sure. Since I started with M80, I guess we can begin there. Generally, you're probably the least confident in them compared to the other three in this group, but they still do have some of the pieces needed to be really, really good. I mean, the DPS line alone is good enough to counter anybody in the world. Happy and Pelican are a proven duo, two superstars at the highest level. They're together, they're in NA, they're going to be on LAN. We've seen them go on runs before, so why couldn't they do it again necessarily? If they get hot, they could pull off a major upset or two. You can't underestimate these two on the same team together. They can do some nasty work. I mean, they beat Toronto Defiant once. If they're prepared for like their first round matchup or for certain opponents, they could do something crazy here. It's just going to be on the team as a whole and how they're able to work. Hawk needs to go a step beyond and be that player in his prime again. And just in general, they have a more so unproven backline at a global level like this. Ultraviolet and Liar are good for NA or even Western standards, but when we're going above and beyond and you're facing everybody in the world, neither of these guys have really done much in their career so far to justify that they're good enough and that you should be totally confident in them. How M80 does is going to greatly depend on how far they come as a team, not necessarily how hard Pelican and Happy can carry you. And honestly, if you have questions about how someone does with their teamwork, maybe they aren't quite ready for the spotlight. So we're going to have to watch them cautiously, but maybe with some optimism. On the topic of NA and I guess their quote-unquote rivals, you've got the Toronto Defiant, the first place finisher in North America, and the most dominant team out there by far and none. We knew these guys were going to be a super team for those standards, and they did not disappoint, only losing one game from stage 1 through 2 up until this point from official standards. When you've got two of the strongest young NA prospects as well as 3 Overwatch League champions on your team, of course you're going to be really good. But now we're going to have to see if they're really up for the challenge. This roster was built for this kind of moment, to show that they are the best in the world. That was the idea when this team was assembled, to finally break the Toronto's mid curse. With experience, flexibility, and the hunger to win, maybe this is going to be their time to shine. But this challenge ahead is going to be unlike anything else they've faced, being in arguably the weakest of the big regions. This team has rarely been challenged outside of a couple of strange outliers from time to time. They've ravaged through the competition. It's been very casual, super relaxed overall, not something they've been taking all that seriously. But now things are being taken up multiple notches. The flame is being set to high. They may not necessarily be the #1 favorite to win it all, but there's a lot of pressure on these guys, knowing the preseason expectations. And if they fail to deliver, that could really hurt their season heading into the future. And trust me when I say it's not just the Korean teams they have to worry about, as ENCE and Space Station are pretty nasty too, and we've seen them give them the work in scrims. ENCE, to start off, they got second place back-to-back in stage 1 and 2. There's maybe some questions about choking, and if they're ready for the big moments. They always seem to let these games go when it feels like they should have it on paper, but generally, it's a really nice roster. The choking allegations will be something they have to rise above, and it'll be a concern that follows them until proven otherwise, but you've got the all-around team you need, with 2 solid tanks that give you good coverage, a support line that will still be solid even with Crimzo heading over to the head coaching role, and you've got a really solid DPS line when they're on fire, can compete with anybody else out there. Not to mention that Crimzo, maybe his ideologies and ways of adjusting to the game could be better than what Gunba brought to the table. This ENCE team has the potential to maybe be better than what we saw through the first couple of stages in EU. There's room for things to be worse as well, but at the end of the day, they're not favorites either, and they're just going to do their thing, and they're hungry to win. They've had a couple of heartbreaking championship losses, but in the end, stuff like that could only make them stronger and could give them the mental capacity to get past some of these teams who haven't had to deal with a lot of losing yet. Not to mention, because they've been there twice, that's good consistency, they've looked competitive and strong against their opponents, and for some of these teams that haven't really faced them that much so far, that could prove to be a major advantage. That fire could be something they're not prepared for, and ENCE could end up walking away further in this tournament than you might think. Then there's your top team from EMEA, at least right now, Space Station Gaming, aka the London Spitfire Boys, plus Funny Astro and Psycho tagging along. This team looked very good in Stage 2, and they've shown great strides as a team since the beginning of OWCS, where they're consistently struggling and losing to the top teams, and they had that choke against Oblivioni as well in the Stage 1 tournament. But then Stage 2 comes along, and we see significant improvement, better consistency, as well as an excellent comeback against ENCE, down 3-1 to win Stage 2. This team's confidence is sky high, they've got the momentum, they seem like they're back on track to be that team that we were hoping they'd be during the preseason, and what's great is they're all improving, both individually and as one collective unit. But they don't quite feel like the London Spitfire of old. They still have all the great personalities, they're still easy to cheer for, but they're more versatile. They're not the silly Rhine team so much anymore. They still can be, but they can play other things very efficiently. Not to mention that Funny Astro's been a seamless fit next to London. They're a backline that can compete with anybody in this tournament. Then we have the likes of Sparker and Psycho, who are playing the best Overwatch of their careers right now. Sparker, even though he looked pretty good towards the end of his Overwatch League tenure, has kicked it up a notch or two, just playing out of his mind as arguably the best DPS in EU at the end of Stage 2, alongside Psycho was actually realizing all of his potential, and has come such a long way since his Overwatch League days, being a beastly tracer that can even stand up to the likes of Kevster from time to time. This SSG team is a beast, and even though I said they aren't quite like the London of old, in a way they also are rather similar to them, as at the end of the day, even though they've made changes, they still have a lot of the same players, which means the same mindset, fundamentals, confidence, experience, and coaching as well. And as we all know, based off of that experience, they're pretty well set for this type of tournament environment. We've seen them do well in the face of the pressure. They've made major runs before while being doubted, and they're likely going to be doubted again here too. Maybe not as much as the OWL days, but they're still not going to be favored over the Korean teams in most people's eyes, and that could be their biggest strength. Those doubts give them power. They're ready for these moments, and you're not always sure if these other teams are. We've seen them beat some big-time names, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens again here. But some of those big-time names look really, really dangerous, and it's understandable if you think they'd come up short. Which gets me to, I'd argue, the top tier, or the favorites tier, maybe you'd say. The Korean teams, that's kind of just how it goes, but we're putting Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons in this tier as the guys that just have the best rosters overall, because I mean, Korean super teams forehead, but generally they are really, really nasty. They're going not on home turf this time, they're going on the road. They're the ones that have to travel across the world. That's going to be tough for them. That will be an adjustment. But man, you already know these guys are motivated to win. A lot of these guys have a bunch to prove. And the best example of that is what Team Raccoon are trying to do. Arguably the favorites to take home this entire event. The top seed from Asia. A team that dominated and almost always won convincingly. They lost only one match in all of their games up until this point. That being to Falcons, who are a pretty good team themselves, and they've beaten those guys handily a bunch more times than they've lost to them, so you're feeling pretty good about them in that regard. Now sure, it'll be tough adjusting to like EU and NA play styles, maybe that could catch them off guard a little bit, but man, they have a lot of the juice and the willpower right now that makes a team good, that you want to have the confidence in, and that you want to get behind in this kind of tournament. I mean, right off the bat, Lip Shu, Chorong, 3 veterans of the game. 2 of those guys have already won championships. Shu is arguably the best flex support in the entire world right now, and you know he's hungry to finally get that title, and this is just a stepping stone to make it there. He's tired of all the losing in the second places. He wants to go above and beyond, while Chorong wants to continue his dominance, and Lip wants to get back into the first place category. But the thing that really might drive them over the edge are the young guys that joined the team. I brought this up before, and I need to repeat myself. He's saying Junbin and Max may actually be the ultimate key for this team to go the distance. Yes, the veterans have the fire and that determination to win, but there's only so much you can do when you've been playing for a long time. But some of these younger guys might actually give them the motivation to rise above and beyond, and can give them a bit of a lift during these games, as they just have so much more to prove. They haven't done anything in their careers outside of O2 Blast, and after the shock incident last year, they're out for revenge. And based off of what we've seen so far, there may not be any stopping them. He's saying looks like a top tier flex DPS. If he's ready to go, it's going to be scary with him and Lip. And then you have Junbin. Max has been playing some maps from time to time, but a lot of the focus is on Junbin and the level of play and the jump we've seen in his game. Being that top tank that we were promised so far out there in Korea, this guy looks like he is out for blood, looking dominant regardless of what he plays. A lot of people said this dude was coming during the offseason and he looks like a different beast, and they weren't kidding. If he can stand up to the veteran tanks of other places in the world, there's really going to be no stopping him. He will solidify himself as a top tank player in the entire world for sure. No team is perfect, and this includes them. There could be situations where they're really thrown in for a loop and they are challenged between different playstyles of other regions, and certain compositions they're not the best at. But man, they feel like they're one of the most poised, if not the most poised, to go on a run and take this home. Knowing how well they've done in Korea, as well as the super team they have, plus, like I was saying before, the combination of players they have. You have 3 veteran superstars, but then also 3 players that are so hungry to go above and beyond and push this entire team to a new level. I love the situation that Crazy Raccoon is in right now, and I'd be very disappointed if they're not at the bare minimum in that championship match. Speaking of fear of being disappointed in them, Falcons are in a very similar boat. Unfortunately, they've been playing little brother to Raccoon, losing to them almost every single time except for one. Unfortunately, a lot of the time in Korea, that type of stuff can really affect your mindset. Pride means so much. Being able to defeat the others, dominating them on that same comp, it really means a lot to those guys. So coming up short consistently, maybe it could hurt their mindset, but at the end of the day, hopefully they realize this tournament means a lot more in terms of bragging rights, and winning here could do a wonder for their confidence. This is the one that means the most up until this point in the season. And it's not like they don't have the team to make it happen, right? Even with shortcomings in mind, I mean, you have one of the best backlines ever. You have one of the most prominent young DPS duos out there, plus 2 veteran tanks who have so much more knowledge than most of these guys. This is an insane team, and they definitely have the motivating factors to do well in this thing. Chio and Fielder, they've been the victims of choke gaming and Stalker as well in recent memory. Proper just wants to get to first place after the shortcomings on the Shock the last couple of years. You have 2 tank players maybe trying to get their last hurrah as well. They're in a similar boat to Raccoon, where they're built in a way that's really good. You have the young guys like Chio, Proper, and Stalker to move you forward, and then you have the vets with Hanbin, Smurf, and Fielder. There is a good balance with this team. It's just a matter of if they can get out of their own heads and truly execute at that highest level. These Krusty-led teams have been coming up short a lot recently, and I'm hoping that this one could be different. It's been rough for them always having to face second place, but at the end of the day, outside of that, they have looked quite good. They rarely have gotten pushed outside of playing against Raccoon, so there's reason to believe that anybody else that comes their way is going to get dominated, or they're at least going to be favored over. So there you have it. There's your 8 teams, all with their own respective strengths, weaknesses, and storylines. What will the scriptwriters have in store for us this time in this epic double elimination tourney? Well, in my opinion, the bracket will go something like this. I'm expecting to be very wrong as always. I'm sure some crazy stuff is going to happen somewhere along the way, but ultimately, I do think that Crazy Raccoon is going to take this home. I just love how their team feels right now. There's maybe some room for some choking with those young players, but now it just feels like the time. All those guys are on top of the world. They've been playing so great, and if they stay out of their own way, I don't see how anybody else beats them. I love the makeup of this team, and just a lot of these guys are going to be great. Lip always shows up in big matches, win or loss. You know that Shu is going to be a god. I mean, I'd argue he's the best flex support in the game right now. Chorong is coming off an Overwatch League championship, and if you're going to pair up Lip with somebody like Heesang, if he's on, that's going to be really hard to stop. They've got to be the favorites at the end of the day, just knowing what we know about them and what we've seen over in Korea. As for who I have facing them in the finals, I'm going to get a little spicy and say Space Station. For the rest of my bracket, I didn't want to be completely and utterly boring. I usually play it so safe and just say, oh, the Korean teams will be good forehead, but this time, we're going to change it up a bit. Space Station are very well known for making crazy upsets happen in these types of tourneys, and I could see the same thing happening here where they just go on a crazy run. Feels like they're born to do such a thing, and I think it'd be really funny if they beat Team Falcons. Honestly, I could even see them giving them a good fight in the upper bracket semis if they were to meet, just because I think they're actually a better matchup than people give them credit for, but also the idea of Falcons losing to Crazy Raccoon again makes me think they could be completely and utterly boomed at that point, so why not have Space Station somehow boom them even further? I mean, they've already beaten a lot of the members of this team. We're talking Stalker, Fielder, Chio, Proper as well. Why not let it happen again? Oh, also, something I should probably point out if you haven't been keeping up to date with social media is that on day one in that first round, there's actually going to be 2 games on at the same exact time for whatever the hell the reason. Falcons and Ents, as well as Space Station and Students of the Game, will be being played simultaneously. So if you want to watch both games as they're happening live, of course check out the normal broadcast on Overwatch Esports, but then check out their Twitch channel, Overwatch Esports 2 as well, as that's going to be where the other game is played. Now, thankfully, it seems like only one of these games could be really, really good, but still, if you want to see both, this is what you gotta do. On the topic of that first round, I guess I should say upper bracket quarters as well as that first round in the lower bracket, things should be pretty standard. A lot of these matchups feel pretty lopsided. Maybe Ents versus Falcons could be kind of interesting, but I'm not going to completely hold my breath in that regard. After that is where things could get a bit chaotic though. I mean, the upper bracket semis, a potential Crazy Raccoon versus Toronto matchup could be really, really interesting. Crazy Raccoon are good, but Toronto are not too shabby themselves, and I'd love to see where they currently stand as a team, and if they're truly ready for this international competition. In my opinion, they are not. I don't think they're strong enough. I don't think they've been challenged enough. I think this is going to be a wake-up call for them, and they're going to end up going to that lower bracket much earlier than they would have liked to. And I actually don't even think they're going to get top 3. I just get this feeling an EU team of some sort is going to take them out. Maybe it'll be Ents, maybe Space Station, but I just don't see them getting as far as they probably should. I don't know, man. I just don't like that they've been playing in NA. It almost makes me think they might be a little too soft for this specific scenario. Plus, Space Station are really, really awesome, man. I love their teamwork. I love their confidence, the experience in this type of situation. Not to mention that Sparker and Psycho and Landon have been on an absolute tear. I think generally, though, a top 3 should, consist of Crazy Raccoon, Falcons, and then either Space Station or Toronto with, Ents with an outside shot looking in. Those are the big-time favorites in this tournament, but I don't think anybody's beating Crazy Raccoon personally, so I'll just leave it at that. I unfortunately think the grand final won't be that good if it's not Falcons. We typically don't have great grand finals in tournaments, so it's nothing new. We're kind of just living up to the trend at that point, but hopefully I'm wrong there. Let me know what you think about this bracket, and if you're hyped for this Dallas LAN event down in the comments below. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. Make sure to give this video a like as well, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It helps a lot, and you can stay up to date with all of my most recent OWCS content. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I appreciate your support a ton, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.